Good evening, everyone. I am calling this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board to order. Today we are October the 12th, 2021. And Carl Boas, I would like for you to take roll call, please. Carl, would you do us the honors of taking roll call, please?
Oh, yes. Excuse me just a minute. Chair Rios,
Here.
Frank Katz,
Here.
Jennifer Beachide,
Here.
John Bienvenu,
Here.
Anthony Guida,
Here.
Flynn Larson,
Here.
Betty Roybal.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Carl. Are there any changes to the agenda? Carly or Frank?
Yes, we have changed. I have changes to the agenda. And we need to amend the agenda to strike line 5
Frank
and
Katz?
6.
Oops, hold on.
Under
Jennifer
Carly,
Beachide,
Oh, had you not finished the roll call?
I'm sorry, I did. Did you ask for roll call for the vote on the agenda?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Carly
sorry.
has the floor now. She's amending the agenda. So Carly, you have the floor. If you can start again.
Okay, we need to strike line 5 and 6 under the facts, findings, and conclusions of law. That one's a duplicate and one's for next week. So apologies. And then we also need to strike line number 5 under new business. That is case number 2021-004260-HDRB. The address 1224 and a half Sarah Gordo. That case, the applicant wishes to redesign and postpone. That is all.
Thank you. Any other changes?
No, ma'am.
Katz moves to approve the agenda as amended.
Wait a second.
And Guida seconded. Carl, roll call vote, please.
Hmm.
And you're muted, Carl. Carl, can you unmute? Okay.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes. Now, can you start all over with that roll call vote, please?
Yes, Frank Katz,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Betty Roybal.
Yes.
The motion is passed unanimously.
Thank you, Carl. And we have minutes of September the 28th, 2021. Any changes to any of these members of the board or staff? We have member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 12 of the September 28 minutes, on the very second line on the page, after the comma, after home at 211, add that the entry will have battered parapets, comma. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Member Beachside.
Thank you. On page 23 of the packet, the 6th paragraph, Member Beachside asked if that is 10 feet and how the board should consider the addition that connects to that in terms of, please strike primary there. It should be in terms of the impact on the primary west facade. And then on page 25, in the 2nd paragraph, Member Beachside said additional testimony is needed for the board to evaluate strike design, to evaluate criteria, exception criteria number 3, and the design options considered in the goal of the project. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Guida?
Thank you. On page 22, second paragraph, third sentence, let's change conceivable to inconceivable. He thought it inconceivable a 400 square foot addition would be adequate. That's all.
Thank you. Any other changes? No one else has their hand up, so I will entertain a motion to approve these minutes as just amended.
Beachside moved to approve the amended minutes.
Katz seconds.
Carl, could you give us a roll call vote, please?
Yes, I'll try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer Beachside,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Lynn Larson,
Yes.
Buddy Roybal,
Recuse.
Frank Katz.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Carl. Under findings of fact and conclusions of law, we have 4 of these. They are the first 4 listed. And are there any changes to any of these? Anyone? It appears
None from
not. I will entertain a motion.
Katz will move to approve the findings and conclusions as submitted.
And is there a second?
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, Carl?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Frank Katz,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Jennifer Beachside,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Buddy Roybal,
Recuse.
Lynn Larson.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you, Carl. Let's see, we have any matters from the public? Let me see if I see any hands that are raised. I do not. I do not see any hands raised from the public. So I will go to staff communications. Carly, anything under staff communications?
We do, ma'am. Towards the end of this month, the 29th, I believe, code enforcement for the signs and the historic district will pick up. In the past, this past year, due to COVID and a number of other things, it was a little more slow. So I wanted to announce publicly that will be happening and with a stronger presence. That is all.
Thank you. So we will move on to old business. And the first case under old business is 2021-004119. That's located at 638 East Palace Avenue. Daniel, this is your case. And you need to unmute.
Can you please enable screen sharing?
You're good to go.
So we're returning to a case that we saw in a recent hearing on September 14th, 2021. It involves the contributing structure at 638 East Palace Avenue. I've corrected the facade diagram here to show the facades, and we're looking here at facade number 5 in particular. At the rear of the property, where the applicant is proposing a patio and portal extending over this portion of the structure. At that time, the primary facades had just been designated here. Primary, this where the 7 here along this south, I think east facade was designated primary, and the portal sits close to the primary facade. The application has been revised so that the portal sits a little bit further back, still differentiated from this primary facade. The other elements are basically unaltered. They did do a little bit more research and discovered that this bump out area here, I think I would another. Well, here you see it in the elevation. This is a non-historic portion of the structure. So the main elements are this proposed portal, the changing of these non-historic window openings to accommodate French doors. This being the south elevation, the applicant is requesting the exception so that the portal can give shade to this heavily sun affected window. The other elements are described in the staff report to change windows, to install skylights on the roof, a mini split which will be screened, to replace the courtyard, and to replace other non-historic windows. That's the gist. The report has the more precise details, and I stand for questions.
Thank you. Daniel, can you describe or tell us whether that porch, the proposed porch, can or cannot be seen from a public?
It cannot be seen. There's no public visibility of it.
Thank you. Any other board members have questions for Daniel at this time? It appears not. Carl, would you swear in the applicant or applicants? It appears that Scarlett Breeding has her hand
Yes.
up. And would you swear her in, please? Carl,
Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
Scarlett Breeding, 638 East Palace Avenue.
Thank you.
thank you. Good evening, Ms. Breeding. Do you have anything in addition to what staff just told us? Do you have anything to tell us about your project?
Yes, thank you very much. I think first, Mr. Schwab did a good report. I would just like to add, after we heard your comments from the last meeting, that we did make a few other modifications to this proposal. One of them was to reduce the size of the French doors that are proposed on the back south elevation to 4.6. They had been 5 feet. We thought that it would be important to keep those doors within the existing opening of the windows themselves. And then another thing, that was one. The second piece that we discovered was in reviewing them that the existing windows in the bedroom do not meet IBC section R310 for egress, which requires every bedroom space to have an egress window. And that window has to be a minimum of 24 inches tall. These windows do not meet that particular requirement. And then we had someone out servicing the laundry and discovered that whole addition that Mr. Schwab pointed out was not, or that whole laundry room section was an addition to this facade back in the 80s. And so none of that is historic. And basically those were just the additions to what Mr. Schwab has already said.
Thank you. Did you have anything further?
Not at this point, unless there's a question that I could answer, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant? It appears that no hands are up, so there are no questions for you. And I believe no one from the public I don't see anyone from the public with their hands up. So I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a
Representative
motion.
Benyon?
I'm sorry, did you, I wasn't clear. Did you call on me, Chair Rios?
I did call on you.
Okay, thank you. I will go ahead and make a motion if there's no further discussion. In case 2021-004119 HDRB, 638 East Palace Avenue, I move that findings be entered that all required exceptions have been met based on the record presented to the board in this case, and pursuant to staff's recommendations, the board approves the application as submitted.
Thank you. Member Roybal.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Carl, may we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Betty Roybal,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Jennifer Beachhead,
Yes.
Frank Katz.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Breeding. And good luck on your project. Next, we have case 2021-004121 located at 1023 East Alameda. Angela, this is your case. May we hear it? May we hear from you? Angela, can you hear?
And unmuted, yeah, now I need to share my screen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Seems like tonight people are having an issue with muting and unmuting, so.
Okay. All right. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Case 2021-004120 HDRB at 1023 East Alameda returns tonight with some revisions. The 1023 Alameda property is a 21,118 square feet vacant lot that fronts East Alameda across from Patrick Smith Park in the downtown and East Side Historic District. The applicant proposes to construct a new, and I want to correct this from the staff report, 4,050 square feet building. It's correct in the agenda, just so you note. The size of the new house is approximately 4,000 square feet. And it consists of elements or has elements of territorial and Spanish Pueblo revival styles. The revisions are brought to you this evening after the board provided input at its September 14th board meeting. These are to orient you to the site and the public. These are the story poles in place for the heights. And this is also another view from Alameda Street, the south of the lot. This is a view of the neighbor to the east along Alameda Street. That's a brick walkway. And this is a similar photo taken from the east perspective, walking west. So it's back in here. And I'm going to let the applicant present the design. I'll just go through a few quick things and my recommendation, and then I'm going to turn it over to the applicant. This is the site plan. This is Alameda out here, and this is the footprint of the proposed house. This is the topography, the existing contour lines of the property. Because this case, the applicant's requesting an additional 11 inches for slope. And this is the floor plan. So orienting you from the street, This is the front door. This is the garage looking that way. And I'm going to go let him do the rest of the plans. So the proposed residence height ranges from 13 feet 5 inches to 16 feet with a maximum allowable height is 15 feet 1 inch. The site changes grade 4 feet along the proposed building's footprint, and the applicant requests the 11 inches extra. The design is a mix of Spanish Pueblo revival and territorial revival styles, as well as elements of recent Santa Fe style, with respect to its simulation of traditional materials, colors, and proportion. The Spanish Pueblo revival style elements include single-story, wall-dominated, stepped massing with gently rounded corners and deep-set, bull-nosed punched openings, flat roof with parapets, and an earth tone color. Its territorial styling includes brick coping and a deep-set portal with columns, yet the portal columns are steel rather than wood. The portal's large plate glass window under the portal will be aluminum, and the brick coping will be dark gray versus dark red. The applicant believes that these details speak to the recent Santa Fe style design standards within the downtown and East Side Historic District Ordinance. The massing is stepped at various levels to accommodate the site's slope, which descends north toward the acequia. Board suggested the applicant change the garage door from glass and aluminum steel to one of a more traditional material and appearance. In response, the proposed garage door is steel, painted in a dark brown to match the dark brown exterior color of the windows throughout the house. Other windows and doors will be aluminum with matching oil rubbed bronze matte paint finish, and all publicly visible windows will have divided lights. The board had concerns about two thin steel columns at the entry portal that penetrated the roof, one of which was not plumb. The applicant has subsequently altered this configuration by substituting a pair of 8 by 8 inches column paired as is typical in some territorial style portales. Stowe will be stucco Sahara, brick coping will be dark gray. And I'll let the applicant describe more changes to the yard wall. And I will just add that the skylights, solar panels, and rooftop appurtenances will be screened by rooftop parapets. Staff recommends approval of the proposal and finds that it complies with the downtown and East Side District standards, and staff defers to the board whether to grant an additional 11 inches in height per section 14-5.2, capital D, 9, little c, double I, capital F regarding slope. And with that, I conclude my portion of the presentation and stand for questions.
Board members, do any of you have questions at this time? I see that Ms. Picarillo has her hand up. Yes, ma'am.
We have one other item for this case, and it's a recommendation from staff, and I'm going to read that in now. And it is staff recommends a vote to rescind the vote taken on this case on September 14th, 2021 HDRB hearing. And that specifically, it was the vote to approve the project as was submitted, finding that the project complies with all district standards, and recommends the applicant return to staff with a revised design for the garage doors with less glass, possibly solid, with an amendment to approve the additional 11 inches for height. And just the reasoning for that is we need to clean up the administrative record so that it follows standard procedures. And
Ms. Picarillo, does that motion to rescind the September 14th motion, does that need to be done at this point?
Yes, ma'am. It should be done before further, as is my understanding. And for any other questions, I'm going to defer to our attorney, Frank.
And as I understand it, a motion to rescind can be done by any member of the board. I believe that's true per Robert's rules. Member Katz, do you have a question or do you have a motion?
I would be very happy to move to amend the action on
To rescind the action, is that, are you going to?
rescind the action on the motion and the last, at that meeting, whatever meeting it was,
September the 14th.
the 14th of September. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Bienvenue seconds.
Carl, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Betty Royball,
Yes.
Frank Katz,
Yes.
Jennifer Beachide.
I'll abstain.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. If you don't, board members, if you do not have questions at this time for staff, we will go forward to the applicant. Member Benvenu, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question for staff. So one of the questions that came up in our last meeting, Angela, was the issue of what facades the 3-foot rule applies to with respect to windows. In other words, whether the facade needs to be, is the entire elevation and only the external corners are in play in that part of the ordinance, or whether it's also internal corners. And I mentioned that I'd looked at the definition of facade, and the definition of facade does include, in my reading at least, internal facades that, according as defined, including at least an 8-foot width that is offset from an adjacent plane by at least 4 feet. And in this particular case, if that's the correct interpretation, which is what I'm ultimately asking what your opinion is, if that is the correct interpretation, then that would seem to apply to the internal corners of the glass in the portal in this particular project. Do you have any opinion on that?
I see that, excuse me, I see that Ms. Picarillo has her hand up. I don't know if she wanted to answer the question or if Angela can answer the question.
Angela, you may go ahead. I felt remiss in not answering it last
Okay.
time because I think that was asked of me. But
All right,
go ahead.
you might be called upon to also comment. Thank you for the question, Member Bienvenu. The so-called 3 feet to the corner rule, as you have cited, is enforced on publicly visible corners, those that are publicly visible. Window openings, door openings need to be 3 feet from interior corners as well, but not when they're not publicly visible.
Okay.
Got some cases on this, and I remember one I worked on where we struggled with this, and it was a inside corner on a non-publicly visible 2 facades.
Okay, thank you, Angela. So in this particular case, the west elevation is publicly visible, if I'm not mistaken. So wouldn't that mean that there needs to be a 3-foot setback of the glass inside the portal?
You're speaking of the facade of mostly windows under the portal?
Right under the portal, the entryway, yeah. In other words, rather than the glass extending to the wall on both the north and the south, wouldn't it need to be set back 3 feet? And potentially from the roof as well?
That's where the application of being glass under a portal can be larger than, the 30-inch dimension in any direction, and where windows can extend to the corners, the inside corners. Under a portal,
Hmm.
such as windows in the downtown block that have larger windows under portals are closer than 3 feet to the interior corners.
So
I see.
Angela, under a portal, you are indicating that it does not have to be 3 feet from any corner. Is that
From
correct?
an inside corner, yes, that's my interpretation. And Carly, feel free to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Angela. I did a little research on this, and I know you've been very busy, so we have had some conversation around this, but not a lot. And whenever I was also touring the historic districts, when Nicole was here, we talked about it at length. But this rule has been interpreted to be allowable on the interior corners historically in this division, so that windows are within 3 feet from an interior corner.
Even under portals?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I can read the applicable provision of the code as I see it here. I'm looking at
Attorney Rubeli that has a comment? Yes.
14-5.2, subsection E, downtown and east side design standards. Subsection 2, subsection B, the combined door and window area in any publicly visible facade shall not exceed 40% of the total area of the facade, except for doors or windows located under a portal. No door or window in a publicly visible facade shall be located nearer than 3 feet from the corner of the facade. So as I read that, it kind of leaves it open as to whether or not the corner of the facade means the outside or the inside, except it does read shall not exceed 40% of the total area of the facade, except for doors or windows located under a portal. So I think it's up to the board to decide what's publicly visible. That's the code.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And this elevation is definitely visible. Member Benvenu, did you have anything further?
Well, I'm on interpretation, and that my interpretation is that this 3-foot rule would apply to the internal corners in this particular instance, because these are facades under the definition because of the length of the adjacent planes, and that the sort of exception for larger glass under portals that's in the code, I believe, doesn't refer to the 3-foot rule. It's referring to the 30-inch rule, which is a separate subsection. So I think that's maybe consistent with what Carly was saying, that has been our practice in the past.
Thank you. Maybe you'll
Thank you.
further. Member Katz.
Yes, I agree with John and Frank's comment about the application of the 30-inch rule under the portal, but not the 3-foot rule. My problem is that I don't believe that the south end of that portal is publicly visible. I think the north end of it, that facade under the portal, the north end of the facade under the portal is publicly visible, but that's the reason I believe that they have set it back 3 feet to comply with that rule. So I don't see a problem here because of the public visibility or the lack of public visibility of that south end of that facade.
Thank you. Let me see if any other board members have comments.
Actually, I do have another one.
Yes, Member Benvenu.
Thank you. As long as we're on that subject of the windows, the window, I don't know what part of the house that is on the west elevation that's to the north of the entry. Is that 40% of that facade or less?
Or less, yeah,
It is, okay.
yeah.
And that's true with the, I don't know if that 40% rule applies or not to the 3 receding facades in the back, because I don't know if those would be defined as facades or not under our ordinance. But have you done any calculations for those?
Member Bienvenue, I'm just looking at that. I believe they meet that. I can't tell you from this diagram. I think some of these specifics we should ask the applicant to address directly with his renderings as well and clarify all this. So all I'm showing you is one flat elevation, the west elevation, and as Member Katz has pointed out, we don't see the house like this on the west. We see it from the south, and the back, I guess, which would be the west side of this banco windows under the portal is not publicly visible. So I would urge us to have the applicant provide more description of this project as we try to sort these things out.
Okay, thank you. Can I just get one final clarification here? Are you saying that none of the entryway under the portal is publicly visible?
No, I'm saying that this part, towards the, I guess if we're going to call this west, then this is like the south side of this, on this elevation, that's not publicly visible. It's at an angle. So this, like being out here on Alameda, this is publicly visible.
Right, that's what I thought as well.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me that that would still be defined as a publicly visible facade in this particular case, because the majority of it is. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question before we go to the applicant. Angela, is there any steel remaining on this project? Any steel posts or anything steel?
Chair Rios, yes. The steel, so this is the south facing, street facing. So this is the side of the garage, and that we were talking about that west elevation over there just now. This is the portal, and the revision has been to replace the sort of long spindly chopsticks that jumped out with 2 steel columns, dark colored steel columns. So that's steel.
Okay, and they are supporting what?
The portal.
Okay, but what is that made of? The top of the portal. What is
the portal is, let's see, let me get another profile of the portal. So this is the portal. Whether that's a steel column, I can't tell you at this moment. These are the steel columns. This up here, by the way, I believe is an error that the applicant left on the drawing from the previous. So don't look at that as, we'll confirm that. But, and you can ask him to provide the detailing on this portal.
Okay.
And there's, sorry.
Thank you, Angela. And who is the applicant?
The applicant is Gabriel Brown.
Okay. Oh, I see. Carl, would you swear in the applicant, Gabriel Brown?
Mr. Brown, under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gabriel Brown. My address is 7604 Old Santa Fe Trail, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Brown. Can you tell us anything further in reference to this project, in reference to the questions that board members were concerned about?
Yes, I can answer your questions. I had prepared a small presentation if you would care to allow me to present this
Yes,
evening.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, you have the floor.
You may just take a second, see if you can share screen now.
I think so. Let's see how to do this. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Chair Rios, members of the board and staff, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to present the project. As you remember, you saw this project at the previous meeting, and we've made some changes in order to make it more palatable to the board and to ourselves. But let me just go through and kind of reacquaint you with the project here a little bit. First of all, I'm sitting here with Dr. Schneider and Robin Schneider, his wife, and they're with us this evening in case you have any questions for them. But let me just go ahead and present the project. The site plan is such that Alameda is here on the bottom of the site. We'll be pulling off of Alameda. A really important site planning effort that we've made is to turn the garage away from Alameda. The kind of easiest, least expensive and most obvious solution would be to enter into the garage directly off of Alameda. That would have left the garage door facing Alameda. We felt that was inappropriate. Garages, two-car garages are difficult in the historic district because there really isn't a kind of prior pre-1950s and 60s standard by which we can look at that. And so what we can do is sort of turn the garage away. Because of the site planning of the house, we have Alameda here, we have our small parking and turnaround area, and then the garage, which is facing west. If you've seen, we have a large portal. The views on our property are not majestic, but they're sort of beautiful and park-like into this piece of the property as well as into the adjoining property. We have the master suite on the north and the guest suite here tucked behind the garage with a kind of great room, living dining room in the middle of the project, just to orient you. If I could, I think one of the things that's really important to understand about this site and Alameda, for those of you who did not get to see it today, sorry, hold on just a second, is that this part of Alameda is very busy and sort of fast moving, and we did a very quick, sorry, I'm trying to find it. Well, I think I'm going to skip that. We did a quick video of what it's like to drive by, but the speed limit here is about 25 miles an hour. Alameda is curving, and this is on the outside of the curve. So as you're paying attention to traffic, which you need to, it's a major street in this neighborhood. It's kind of the biggest street in this neighborhood. Traffic moves quite quickly, and this property, while being right against Alameda, you do move past it quite quickly. This is the view from the southwest along the street. You can see there's an existing stone wall, which is really quite beautiful along the street. we're planning to move by essentially dismantling and reassembling a section of that stone wall to here, and then put both a pedestrian and a vehicle gate here. We talked about this garage door. It was sort of a divided light glass door. It was quite distracting, and it was obviously not favored by the board in our previous meeting, and we've gone to a much simpler dark brown garage door, which will be essentially match the window trims. We do have a steel portal, to answer Chair Rios's question, that sort of faces to the west. That portal really gets lost as you move past the project, and so you really only see it in profile once you come around to the south side of the property. We have a territorial style brick coping, and yet we have deep set sort of Pueblo style openings there. One of the things that I want to make clear is that we do plan to have 3/4 inch bullnoses at the corners of the building, as well as bullnosing around the windows and doors. That's clear in our application, but it wasn't mentioned by staff, and it did come up as a question last time. So we have sort of modest, simple bullnosing around those corners, although we didn't model it that way because of the complexity of doing that in the model. This is the south elevation, which is really sort of the seconds that as you're driving by for several seconds, for a second and a half, you might see this elevation, which shows the garage door, a divided light window into the garage. And this is the guest suite door. We are seeing the steel portal there in profile. We had a different column configuration in our previous submittal, but thought we would back down to something that, at least in form, is much more traditional, much more in keeping with the territorial style that we're evoking here. This is the view from the southeast, where you're seeing the neighbor on the right, which blocks most of the view of the house, the guest suite just right of center, the garage in the left, and then neighboring properties there. We did reach out. I did want to say that Mr. Anaya, who is a neighbor, provided a letter. I've included that here. Mr. Anaya and his wife, Mary Anaya, live at 117 East Alameda. They have lived there since the 1960s. Mr. Anaya is a former member of the City of Santa Fe Planning Commission. His parents and grandparents have lived on this in this neighborhood and on the property where they currently live since the 1800s. When they saw the yellow poster, they contacted us and then offered this letter, which I'll read to you, and I'd like read into the records. It says, Santa Fe Historical Board, please be informed that we are very much in favor of the building of a residential house at 1023 East Alameda. We see nothing that would differ from the existing area and consider this an improvement to our neighborhood. That's after we showed him the design for the project, and he and his wife Mary and I have signed that. Let's see, there is one sort of important question that arose here during the meeting that I want to get back to, and that is, about what were called the receding facades. I believe member Bienvenu asked about the 40% rule on the receding facades. And the answer is that those, I do not believe, meet the 40% rule actually, but they're not publicly visible. They're essentially on the north elevation and not visible. The other facades, we did do a calculation and we submitted those to staff, and they do meet those rules. Except obviously the 40% rule we don't meet if you're going to deem it a facade underneath the portal, but the code clearly exempts that facade. Have I answered your questions, or do you have any other questions before I move on?
Let me see if anyone on the panel has their hands up. Board members, do you have any further questions for Mr. Brown? And Mr. Brown, thank you for your thorough presentation. Member Katz. Would you unmute Member Katz?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your presentation. My one comment would be that many of us walk by this house as well as drive by, and many of us frolic in the park and therefore are standing looking across at the property. So I don't think it is fair to sort of dismiss that it's only seen for a nanosecond as you drive by. My second question is the portal and the steel on the portal and the provision of the code that says portals on publicly visible portions of the building shall be one of the old Santa Fe styles. And that sure don't look like the old Santa Fe style to me. And I would appreciate your thoughts on that.
I think in form, it is quite respectful of the territorial style. I think if it were painted white, I think it would look as good as many of the territorial style portals that are built in this town out of alternative materials, including foam and plastics, steel and other materials, which are often seen. They're generally painted white. And so I think we are sort of asking for special compensation to some extent, not to paint it white. If it does get painted white, it becomes a maintenance issue, and the paint just won't last all that long. That would also be true of white painted wood. But I think in terms of detailing and style, I think we're being fairly respectful here.
I am not aware of old Santa Fe style that has steel columns and steel beams across on a portal. And maybe other people are, but I think that's a real problem.
I think I could show you ones that have been done that way. I think they have been painted white and are made to, the whiteness makes them look a lot less like steel. But they're certainly around in the historic district. Anyway.
Show me. I mean, just because someone has done something that does violate the rule doesn't mean the rule changes. But I'm not even convinced that there are those, that there are any number of them. And without any evidence of that, I don't see the justification for violating the specific provision of the code.
Member Katz, did you have anything further, or
No, thank you.
Mr. Brown, did you want to respond further?
No, I don't have a presentation prepared this evening of other examples of that. The foam plastic ones on the courthouse, on the new courthouse building, are certainly not made out of wood, and are a strange proportion. The new building at the corner of Paseo de Peralta and Canyon Road has very skinny steel columns. I think there are multiple examples. Again, I'm not suggesting that because someone did it, that establishes a precedent or changes the style. I think that, so I'm not prepared to make that argument this evening.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Thank you, Chair Rios. I'm not aware of anything in the code that precludes using steel in a recent Santa Fe style building in this district. Seems to me that, to apply the old Santa Fe style rules to this project, or really any project that's not built out of Adobe, as articulated in the old Santa Fe style, is ridiculous. I hear the applicant. We see a lot of new buildings that we pass all the time that use materials that are not authentic to the old Santa Fe style, and we approve those projects. recent Santa Fe style acknowledges and creates room for building homes that don't fit the old Santa Fe style. There are no two-car garages in old traditional Santa Fe style architecture. There are no 2x4s and 2x6s. There's no fiberglass insulation. There's all manner of materials that are not true to that style. That's why we have the recent Santa Fe style that acknowledges an ongoing conversation and evolution of those elements that are indeed respectful, but are different in materiality. So I'm not seeing anything in the code that precludes the steel being used in this application.
Thank you, Member Guida. Member Beachside.
And yeah, I have a question along the same lines, like maybe of staff. Could you clarify, is this a requirement that we're sort of not aware of, that new construction needs to follow an old Santa Fe style with respect to specifically portals? Or maybe Member Katz can point us to the code. I don't.
Yeah, it's right. The definition of recent Santa Fe style, that subsection E explicitly says portals shall be of one of the old Santa Fe styles.
And Member Katz, that's under recent Santa Fe style.
Yes, yes. Which they're claiming that this is, and therefore steel is okay, which I would like to comment at some point when you have the time.
Chair, if I might, this is Angela. I'd like to go to the code and walk us through the downtown and east side and where this all is pulling from. Downtown and east side district standards. The opening paragraph before it even gets into old Santa Fe style. I'm going to read that to you. The governing body recognizes that a style of architecture has evolved within the city from the year 1600 to the present, characterized by construction with adobe, hereafter called old Santa Fe style, and that another style has evolved, hereafter called recent Santa Fe style, which is a development from and an elaboration of the old Santa Fe style with different materials and frequently with added decorations. And then you go to the old Santa Fe style. It does say in the first graph, old Santa Fe style characterized by construction with adobe is defined as the Pueblo Spanish or Spanish Indian territorial styles. And then it goes on to describe those styles. So then you follow that to recent Santa Fe style within the downtown and east side district standards. And it's recent Santa Fe style intends to achieve harmony with historic buildings by retention of a similarity of materials, color, proportion, and general detail. The dominating effect is to be that of adobe construction. And then it lists the prescriptions for that, such as not more than 2 stories. We get into the massing and the window openings, the areas of those, and public visibility. In working on this case, I've become much more aware of these 3 different, I don't want to say they're not equal clauses, but therein lies the work of staff and this board, is how to interpret all of this for new proposals. And as staff interprets it, Santa Fe style, I mean, it's the old Santa Fe style portal. It is with a different material, which this recent Santa Fe style provides room for. So I just wanted to elaborate on that for this.
Thank you. Member Beachside, did you have something further?
Yeah, no, I'm reading that and I see the logic there. Although I guess I have some trouble defining style in terms of, there's several elements that go into that: design, materials, color, the placement. And what I see under Old Santa Fe style is that, just sort of the presence of inset portales or exterior portales. I don't see really specific direction about material, and I haven't seen that for other elements as well. And I think maybe critiquing this project based purely on the use of steel is potentially problematic, because we do see a lot of steel in this district. We see tons of steel at vehicle gates. There's even steel or aluminum or metal of some sort coping over the brick coping on the Matterfield School, which is nearby. So there's elements of steel used in traditional structures in this district. What's nice about this design is the sort of reflection of the, the design style, maybe is what you would call it, the brick coping being mimicked by the form of the steel on the portal and the post. So in form, this does match a territorial style. So I'm sort of less concerned about the use of steel over the portal. The other area of disagreement, I guess, in previous discussions has been the garage. And as Mr. Brown mentioned, there is not a precedent for garages in this district. So it's very difficult to determine what is an appropriate placement of a garage and material used there. But I think this effort to turn it sideways, is a step in the right direction, certainly. In looking at, all that just to say that I think our code is very prescriptive in some areas, and this seems to meet those prescriptive terms. Our code is super subjective in other areas, and that's where I think we have to make some hard, sort of opinionated decisions about cases like this. And where I turn is to looking at the streetscape. And along the stretch of Alameda, it's largely landscaped, which the project has sort of acknowledged by creating an extension of that landscaping on the west side of the project. And then further on, there's the traditional compound that the Anayas live in, which I might mention has a very modern house at the back of that lot. So it has a very slim vertical window, which is not very visible, but you can see it if you look for it. And then there's we hit the curve of Alameda, and there's a couple of houses that I would characterize as more contemporary than the others. They also have garages. One is turned sideways. The other is straight on as you come down Alameda going west. They both have gates with steel elements in them. I think there's 3 vehicle gates with steel. So in terms of harmonizing with the streetscape, I think this project does. The only thing I would suggest is the garage door, I think, could be improved with a nod toward the wood vehicle gate and pedestrian gate rather than to the aluminum windows. I think, a wood element there is more appealing than, of course, I haven't seen the door in person, but the aluminum doors seem a bit like super out of character for this district. Just that flat expanse of metal doesn't really work, and you will see that going east on Alameda. So I would like to ask the applicant if you've thought of another treatment for that door that included wood and maybe related more to the vehicle gate. I guess that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll keep that question in mind, and I'll go to Member Benvenue.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually going to comment earlier just on the issue of the wooden versus steel columns. There actually is a provision addressing that material for portals. strangely enough. And that's what I've been focused on in this case, because I think our job is to just apply the ordinance as it's written. But there may be some ambiguity in it. But just to point it out, under recent Santa Fe style, which is subsection E2, subsection E states that windows, doors, and portals on publicly visible portions of the building and walls shall be one of the old Santa Fe styles. And then in turn, under old Santa Fe style, which is E1, it does state in subsection A that roofs are never carried out beyond the line of walls except to cover an enclosed portal. And then the outer edge of the roof is supported by wooden columns. That clearly does state that portals are supported by wooden columns. It's one of the few times the ordinance calls out that kind of material. It may not be perfectly applicable here because it's not clear that this is actually an extension of the roof rather than just a portal being added to the facade. But that does, to me, imply that the drafters of the ordinance intended portals to be supported by wooden columns.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe that this board's role is to narrowly interpret the code. Staff can certainly interpret our legal strictures and apply the code as written. I am really concerned about what a kind of almost absurdly narrow legalistic interpretation of our code is in service of. To me, it doesn't promote diversity in the district. It doesn't protect homeowners and tourists and property values. It doesn't promote the economic, cultural, and general welfare of the people here. And by culture, I would include in that design culture. So these discussions about exactly where what exactly is a facade, exactly where the 3 feet rule applies, these seem to be aimed at sinking a particular project, not at assessing the project overall and its placement within the historic district. I'll add to that the downtown and East Side Historic District really is the only district that specifies a specific set of historic styles. They are primarily differentiated by the materials and means of construction. So to go back to this argument about should these columns on this portal be steel or should they be wood because they are publicly visible? I agree with Angela's interpretation here. I am incredibly appreciative of Member Beachside's interpretation of this as following the style, the silhouette, right? The proportions, the aspects of these historic styles, but yet evolving and moving them forward. It would be as ridiculous to require a project built in a recent Santa Fe style to make these things out of wood, as it would be as ridiculous to make the windows that are publicly visible also be out of materials and glazing that were built in that time 200 years ago.
Thank you, Member Guida. Member Katz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do feel that the code expresses the will of the city to retain in the historic districts. And I think Mr. Guida is right, in particularly the East Side District, which does have much more prescription than the others, a certain style. And they have specified what that style is. And I think it's our job to approve projects that conform to that style and deny projects that don't conform to that style. I don't think there's an element that's been mentioned several times about the recent Santa Fe style allows materials other than wood and glass and adobe and mud. And that's very true. And I think there's nothing wrong with using steel in a recent Santa Fe style building, but it's not to be used where it's not allowed to be viewed. I mean, steel is hardly harmonious with the style of buildings that we think of the Santa Fe style. There's a specific style, and I think we all know what we're looking at when we look at old Santa Fe, and that portal you're looking at there ain't that. And what's particularly significant here, I think, is what Member Bienvenu quoted, which is that particular portal needs to be the old Santa Fe style, because that's what the new Santa Fe style expressly says. And I cannot agree with Mr. Greta that we can just ignore that as we're moving forward in progress. I don't think that we can or should do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Guida, you have your hand up. Did you finish, or is that left over, or did you have something further?
Leftover, I'm done.
Thank you. Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is, I'm completely respectful of all the members' comments. I think they're all, of course, well-meaning, more than well-meaning. They're intended to be what's best for the city, not for anybody in particular. They're deeply informed, and they're important. And I think that everyone on the board shares pretty much all of the same, from my experience, shares all of the same values and desires with respect to the way they would like to see our ordinances and our city address change, and while preserving the past, and have the best city we can have for every possible resident of it. And the question to me is not that. The question to me is really, how do we interpret the ordinance? In my view, I just want to say, I don't believe it is legalistic. Of course, I can't help but be legalistic, but that's not the reason for it is to be legalistic, to attempt to arrive at certain outcomes. The reason it may seem quite legalistic is because I'm very conscious, I hope we all are, of the limited power that's been delegated to us on this board. We are not policymakers, and we all have ideas probably about how the ordinance could be better written and changed dramatically in many ways, and ways that it actually hinders rather than advances things that we all agree are important. But we're not policymakers. No one elected us. Not one citizen of this city has asked us to be a member of this board or to make decisions other than in a quasi-judicial capacity to interpret the ordinance that the governing body has passed. And the governing body wrote it in the 50s, and they've amended it on multiple occasions since then, and they have the opportunity to amend it at any time that they so desire. And so given that, the text is what we always have to come back to. And when the text provides that it delegates any discretion to us, then the text is granting us that discretion to reach our decisions. And that does often happen. But when the text is unambiguous and actually is quite specific, such as being Adobe or Adobe-like in this particular district, and harmonious in materials, and in this particular case that we're discussing here, the wooden columns, I do firmly believe that it's our duty to apply it as written, as opposed to as we would prefer it to be written. And that's the reason why I come back to the text over and over again, because that's what our job is here. And that's the only fair way. And in fact, the only legitimately lawful way for us to proceed, because that's, if we were exercising greater discretion than that, we'd be acting ultra virus and the court would strike that down. So, we're on a philosophical plane here, of course, but I just wanted to flesh out a little bit why it is that I look at the ordinance the way I do and try to apply it to the facts of the case.
Thank you, Member Bienvenue. Member Larson, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of comments. The first being, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness the board brings and the different perspectives. I do think that Member Beachide had a really interesting point that she brought about the surrounding context in the neighborhood and how several of the surrounding buildings move forward with the interpretation of Santa Fe style in the way that this building does. I noticed that we have changed this design in our comments from the previous hearing, and I think that's rather unfortunate due to the fact that the previous design was more personalized and more in keeping, I think, with other sort of elements that we've seen throughout architectural history, which I found to be really interesting. And I think that we all sort of are assessing the role of this board and sort of how the built environment sort of reflects that. And I think that, this is just the sort of symptom of of having, the Santa Fe style in place, but also it's in place for good reason. However, I do think we can't ignore that there are, other ways to interpret this style in a personalized way.
Thank you, Member Larson. Member Roybal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My concern always is that the legalistic opinion of us members, and we have our own opinions how to interpret the code. I think we have to be very careful to move on and not get stuck. I think we're going to get stuck tonight. And I think we need to just kind of move on as for the vote, because we all have opinions and how we interpret the code. Unfortunately, the code needs to be revised in many ways because of new materials that are coming up. I don't believe the code has been revised in a very, very long time because of the constraints of time and what it takes to redo a code. But so in essence of the time that's involved in this, I think we've had enough opinions of all the members. And again, we respect all of the opinions of all the members and how they interpret the code, that we have to kind of put a time limit to this and move on and just ask for a vote. And we still have a public opinion to listen to. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Roybal. I will tell you that I always feel that it's important. Many members on this board, or some members on this board, feel that it's important to move quickly on applications. My feeling is that it's important to move quickly, but it is also, for me, it is more important to be thorough on every application. And I do thank all board members for their different interpretations in reference to different projects, such as this one that has come before us, and their interpretation of the ordinance and their substantiation of those interpretations. And no, we are not here to make policy, but we do have a guidance. That guidance is our ordinance, and we have to rely on that ordinance to make our decisions. I do notice that there is a person from the public that wishes to comment at this time. But before we move on to Subi Bowden, I did want to ask the applicant if he had a comment in reference to Member Beachside's comment of using wood instead of steel for the garage.
We did discuss, thank you, Chair Rios and members of the board. I did discuss using a wood, to covering the garage door with wood with my client. Because we turned the garage and it faces west, that creates a pretty significant maintenance issue, which is one of the things that we're trying to avoid in general with this house. We would like to avoid that. If that became a condition of approval, we would accept it, but we would like to avoid it.
Thank you. I will move on to public comment, and we have Subi Bowden that needs to get sworn in. Carl, would you swear her in?
Subi, under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Hello, Carl, I do.
Thank you, Subi. Could you state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Subi Bowden. I have a downtown office on Guadalupe Street, and I reside in a rental unit on the Anayas property, which means that there is one lot between this new building and the lot that I reside on with the Anayas.
Thank you. Ms. Bowden, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I thank you all for your very thorough analysis of the code in this particular situation. Because I live so close to this property, I walk by it on at least a weekly basis. Yesterday, I was across the street in the park looking onto it, and I drive by for the last 3 years, as was described earlier, in the 20 to 25 miles per hour on a curve. So I have seen this particular site from all directions. As I mentioned in your last meeting, I'm highly appreciative of the respect of turning the garage door away from the building. I think it's the most important act of generosity that they have done in this project. And I'm aware that whether you're walking in the park or driving by, there's a very brief glance and glimpse of this property, whether you're going downhill and walking or going uphill and walking. And I feel that the change to the garage door is significant and worthwhile. I'm also aware that Commissioner Katz is absolutely correct that the glass under the portal is not publicly visible. And I'm also aware that after my decades of interpretation in the H district, now almost 40 years, that we should address where there's specificity in the code, but we should not over address where there's no specificity. Almost all the new windows throughout the H district, unless they're really on Canyon Road and you're walking by and touching them, in this day and age are clad with steel. The same is true of a garage door and is often true of portals, even though they're stepped to look like they're old, because maintenance in New Mexico is so high. We all recognize you move into this district, you have to pay more, et cetera, but still the Anayas spend a great deal of personal time painting their windows, painting their portals, et cetera, to maintain them on an annual basis. And therefore, I encourage your subsection E2 of recent Santa Fe style as a similarity of old Santa Fe style, but I do not believe that it defines the material of that portal roof. And so I would advise both stylistically as well as costs and maintenance for not only this client, but future clients, that portals which do move be allowed to be in steel as long as they're stepping to look like an older portal. I thank you for your time and appreciate the meeting tonight.
Thank you, Subi, for your comments. And I noticed that, let me see, there's Another person whose hand is up, and that's John Eddy. And would you swear in Mr. Eddy, please?
John, under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy. My address is 227 East Palace Avenue, Suite D, 87501 in Santa Fe. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I very much appreciate the dialogue, the careful dialogue that has been taking place, because these are very important issues to be addressed on this board, and I appreciate the attentiveness to it. I spoke at the last time this came up, and the point I tried to make, which I'm going to repeat to a degree right now, is that steel as an adaptive material, I believe, can be incorporated into buildings as they come of age and new buildings in Santa Fe. But I firmly believe that these materials should not be calling attention to themselves. When they call attention to themselves, they start to clash with our more vernacular traditions, such as brick coping, etc., things like this. And I think one of the things that we may be overlooking, but I also think is tripping us up here, is the scale of the portal. To my eye, the scale of the portal begins to overwhelm certainly the garage next to it when you're looking at this elevation view, as we have been for the last half an hour, 40 minutes. So I was wondering if the architect would consider dropping the height of that portal so that it was not as dominant as it is on both elevations. And I wonder if that would start to make this a more comfortable design for the people that are really having a hard time with it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eddy. No one else from the public has their hand raised at this time. So I will go back to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown.
Yes, Chair Rios.
Can you answer a couple of questions that were brought up in reference to the garage door? I think that you did indicate that you did entertain having a wood door, and if the majority of the board prefers that you would go along with that. And I'm wondering if you can address the question of a person from the public, Mr. Eddy, indicating that if you could drop the portal height. I'm wondering what your comments would be in reference to that.
I'd be glad to address that. The portal is at the same, this is a fairly dark part of Santa Fe. This area is blessed with many trees, which is one of its most attractive features. It also doesn't get much sun. We have a lot which fronts on a very busy street, and we've had to sort of turn our back and turn the garage toward that lot. For that reason, we essentially have one facade where this house opens toward the exterior. We have a neighbor immediately to our east and a neighbor very close and very tall, a two-story neighbor just to the north of us. And so again, the property has one aspect of privacy and view, and that's to the east. And we felt like it's necessary to have fairly high ceilings in the great room, and that the ceiling at the portal matches that. We've put a tall stone base element on the portal so that the proportions of the columns don't look too tall. So we've thought about that and addressed it, but we would very much prefer to leave the overall height of the portal where it is. We did look at design alternatives and discuss those with the clients, but this is the design we've chosen to put forward.
And is that height at 16 feet?
Underneath the portal?
The portal itself, all the way to the top.
Sorry, let me look real quickly at our elevations and answer that question. The top of the portal is 13 foot 10 inches.
Oh,
Um,
mhm.
and the bottom of the portal is about, I think it's at 11 feet. So 13 foot 10 inches is the top element of the portal, as you can see in that elevation drawing. Does that address your question, Chair Rios?
Yes, it does. What was it, 16 feet?
The overall height of the house, so that's the parapet over the great room, is at 16 feet overall, and that is 15 foot 1 inch is what was allowed by the height calculation. And so we have asked for 1 additional foot of height. Essentially, as I described at the previous meeting, this property is very close to the river flood zone, and we designed the overall height of the house to be 15 feet, and then our civil engineer recommended that we raise it 1 foot or 11 inches to get it above the flood zone. So we would, if we don't get the additional feet of height, we essentially will build the same building. We would just dig it another foot down into the ground. But our civil engineer has asked us, recommending that we don't do that. And so that's why we've asked for the additional 11 inches of height.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Let me take it back to the board. And Mr. Guida has his hand up.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
In case 2021-004120, the address 1023 East Alameda, I move that the board approve the project as submitted per staff's recommendation, and also find that that the 11 inches of additional height should be granted for this project.
Thank you. And I believe the case number is 4121. Is that correct? If I'm incorrect, please correct me, Angela.
It's 4120.
20?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Okay. On the agenda, it has 21, but okay, 20. Thank you. Member Roybal,
I'd like to second that motion. Thank you.
is there anything further anybody else wants to add? It appears not. We will take a roll call vote.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Betty Roybal,
Yes.
Frank Katz,
No.
Jennifer Beachside,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
No.
Anthony Guida.
Yes.
The motion does pass.
Thank you very much. And thank you, applicant.
Thank you very much, Chair Rios and the board. Thank you very much.
And we will go on to the next case, which is under new business. And I do need to say that I didn't say this under old business, but I will say it right now in reference to appeals. If you differ, if you have a different interpretation than we render this evening in a decision, you do have the option to appeal, and the findings of fact and conclusions of law have to be approved, and then you have 15 days to appeal. With that being said, we'll go to the first case under new business. That's case 2021-004254, located at 107 Victoria, and this is for a historic status review. Daniel, may we hear your case?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this case deals with 107 Victoria Street. The applicant is requesting a status review for currently non-contributing 2 structures, a main house and a garage. This is the main street facing west facade of the main house. They were both constructed. The main house is believed to be constructed in 1953. This was left portion was the main rectangular structure. And then they extended here in the back. There was an addition with a portal in the front, and the portal was later enclosed. Here's some other pictures. Here again is the portal, enclosed portal. This is the north elevation. And I'm sorry. This is the, I believe, the east elevation. That's the north elevation. Then we have an accessory structure that was constructed in the early 1960s, probably originally as a garage. It's seen some changes in the 2000s. The garage door was probably closed, and this is now the new front elevation. And these are the side elevations. This is the rear. The openings and windows are non-historic. And there was a red tag issued for the change made in this opening just recently. So they are both historic structures, the main house having more general integrity. This west-facing facade, in the opinion of staff, has the character-defining features. And staff recommends that the main house be designated contributing, and the secondary structure as non-contributing, and that the west-facing facade pictured here be designated primary. Stand for questions.
Thank you for your report. Any questions for Daniel at this time, board members? It appears not. Let's swear in the applicant.
It's Will McDonald.
Will McDonald, would you swear him in?
I will. Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do. Thank you. Will, please state your name and address for the record.
Will McDonald, 488 Arroyo Tenorio, Santa Fe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Will.
Hello.
Will, do you have anything more to add to what Daniel just told us in his report?
Well, yes, I do.
Do you agree with his recommendation, or do you not?
I don't. The short of it is that, well, this building is, parts of it are more than 50 years old. That corner was filled in the 80s. And it's not a building that has, Daniel described it as a simplified Spanish Pueblo revival. And what this building is a building built by the people who lived there, built by hand in a traditional Santa Fe style, in the sense that it was adobes. But what you have is non-historic windows, and it's a building that was built to meet the needs of a large family. There were, in Federico Rodriguez family, when this was built, there were 7 children living in this house. And so, like shelter anywhere in the world, people worked with the materials they had and built a home for themselves. But this is not an example of a particular style. There's hardly any form to it. We don't see portals or indentions. We don't see any wood. We don't see corbels. It's an expression of that time, but to preserve it as a contributing building, I think, doesn't fit with the goals of the code, which is primarily to promote the harmonious and orderly growth and development within the city, while preserving qualities that attract tourists and residents alike. Similar to some of the discussions you had earlier. So no, I would hope that the board would see that this building would be best served if it were non-contributing, and the changes would come to the board in the future that you would look at and see how it best meets the needs of the city. I spoke with Pat Rodriguez and Johnny Rodriguez, who lived in this house, grew up in this house, and Pat, the older brother, born in '54, helped to construct the parts of the building. You see in the historic, or the list of the drawing I made showing the dates of the construction, that the west or the north part of the building was constructed in '62, and the garage about that same time. And Pat Rodriguez was talking about being a child of about 8 and helping with making the adobes and stacking the adobes and all the sorts of things people did in Santa Fe since people have been building houses here. So very much a tradition there that he was part of. And then he said that he and his brother, that Pat and his brother Johnny filled in the corner there at the southwest, that in the historic aerial photos you see it was just open. There was not a portal there. But it's the sort of thing that if someone said we want to fill in a corner of this house, it's the sort of thing the board would say, no, we don't want you to do that because it reduces the character of the building. And it does, sadly, but it's what we have here.
I have a question for you and for Daniel. The openings that are on this west facade that the staff is recommending as a primary facade, have those openings changed?
I don't know. I mean, they're sort of peculiar in the way they're laid out. And my sense is that they haven't, from what I've talked about, other than that corner of the building that was added in the 80s.
Yeah, and Will, I'm going to guess that you are in agreement with the garage to be, staff is recommending it as non-contributing?
Yes, that one of the things that changed along with the removal of the garage door was that the height was, that there was an additional 2 to 3 feet of height added there at that time as well. That was the brother Fred, the son of, his father was also Fred. It was the brother Fred who was working on that about 12 years ago. Pat was telling me, and it was, and he got sick and died, and nothing much happened after that.
Okay, let me see what board members have questions for you in reference to this historic status review. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. McDonald at this time? Or any comments? It appears not. I'm going to take it to the public.
Could I just add one more thing here, please?
Sure.
That several of the neighbors wrote emails to Daniel Schwab, and it was also entered in the online comments. John Weisner, the neighbor to the north at 109, Bill and Sharon Stein, who are at, I believe they're at 105 Victoria Street, and Richard Lampert, who's at 111 Victoria Street. All of them are asking that the board keep the building non-contributing because they feel like allowing the building to change in more significant ways than will be a benefit to the neighborhood. And but I believe those emails are there for you to see. I don't need to read all of those.
Those will be made part of the record. It appears that no one from the public wishes to comment on the historic status of this building. I'll take it back to the board. Board members, let me see if anybody has a question. Member Guida.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Yes. It appears nobody else has any comments or questions, so.
So in case 2021-004, sorry, 2021-004-254-107 Victoria Street, I move that the board retain the structure, both the main house and the accessory unit status as non-contributing.
Second, it's bienvenue.
Did you second it, Member
Yes.
Benvenu?
I did.
Would you
Thank
take?
you, Madam Chair.
Would you take a roll call vote, Carl?
Yes. Frank Katz,
Yes.
Jennifer Beachide,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Betty Roybal.
Yes.
Madam Chair, it's unanimous.
Thank you. We'll move on to the same case, to the next case, excuse me, which is at the same address, 107 Victoria. This case is 2021-00-4255. Daniel, your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So following on from the same property, we're now turning our attention to a remodel proposal for the accessory structure. Here are the two existing and proposed floor plans. The intention is to replace the west elevation front door, to install new windows with simulated divided lights, to replace the windows on the south and west elevations, and on the east elevation, and to re-stucco the structure. I should have elevation plans in here. There you can see on the left, well, existing and proposed. This is the front street facing elevation, so it should require this appearance. And this window will become a divided light. The south elevation will be unchanged and the rear door will be converted into a window. So the colors that are intended, I believe the current stucco is elastomeric, and therefore an elastomeric is being once again requested. Stand for questions.
And these are the colors that are going to be used. That the color on the top, is that kind of like a very grayish or not really?
It's called mocha cream. I think it's a kind of, it's got some brown in it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Daniel, board members? No questions for Daniel. Will, do you have any comments to make? Make your comments.
No, I just, as Daniel had pointed out to me, I had made a mistake, and we have two south elevations. There's a north elevation there, which is no change, and so that was a mistake there. That's north.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, invisible to everyone. The west elevation is more symmetrical than I particularly like, but that it's working with the 3-foot rule and the existing door in the middle, we end up with that symmetry. It's the way it falls out there, and those windows will be beneficial to the interior. The window on the south is the same size and the same opening. The window on the east is in the door opening there, and those are not publicly visible. I really don't have anything else to add.
Thank you, Will. It appears that no one from the public wishes to comment on this project. I will take it back to the board for a motion. Member Guida?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. In case 2021-004-255 HDRB 107 Victoria Street, I move that the board approve the project as submitted.
Member Roybal will second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Betty Roybal,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
John Bienvenu,
Yes.
Jennifer Beachide,
Yes.
Frank Katz.
Yes.
It is unanimous, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Will.
Thank you, board. And I also wanted to say I appreciated the thoughtful conversation on the last case. It speaks well for all of you and the way you look through things that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next case is located at 809 Abeta Street. This case is 2021-004256. Daniel, it is your case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 809 Abeta is situated at a 90-degree curve on Abeta Street, so that it has a street frontage on two sides, but it's the same street. It's a essentially a prefabricated structure. It was assembled on site out of prefabricated elements, dates from the 1970s. The applicant is now proposing a renovation and a small addition in the rear. You've seen the structure, but here are the elevations again. There's a slight pitched roof, and this is the existing floor plan. It's a very simple 20 by 40 foot rectangular structure. And the proposal is to redivide the inner spaces and to create an addition on this rear portion, which is not visible from the street. It's angled in order to maximize the square footage given setbacks. In addition, the roof should be raised. It will still be over a foot below the maximum allowable height. But the current height of the roof or the ceilings, due to the slope of the pitch, are very low. So to give higher ceilings, the proposal is to raise the roof, which involves an exception request to change the existing roof style. This is another property by the same owner. He's active on this street. This should give an indication of the color scheme and detailing, such as the lamps and the window and the canales and so forth. There's a list of items that includes pergola, the addition in the rear, buckskin colored stucco, changing of openings, these exterior lights that are shown here. And again, a request is been made for an exception because the roof style would need to be changed from a pitched to a flat roof. If you have additional questions, I stand for questions.
Larson,
I recommend that it be approved and that the exception criteria have been met.
Thank you, Daniel, for your report. Member Larson, do you have a question or a comment?
Hi, yes, just a quick question, Daniel. I noticed that Hickey form dates this house to circa 1954. Do you know where we got the date circa 1970s?
I think it's, I did notice that. I think it says on the form something like the original structure was from 1954 and was basically reduced to low walls, and that this building was constructed after that. So that the 1954 date refers to the original structure of which only the yard walls, I think, are remaining. That's how I read that.
Okay.
I just remember seeing this, this house, since I'm familiar with the neighborhood. I remember seeing this house for years and years and years. I mean, back to the 50s, it seems like to me, but I couldn't be positive of that. Daniel, I wanted to ask you, what is the evidence that this was a prefabricated home?
Well, the applicants can speak more to it. It has to do with the roof construction, the wall, the materiality of the structure. I believe that the roof trusses are prefab elements.
Okay. No other questions from board members, so let's swear in the applicant, Jay Shapiro. Carl, can you swear him in?
Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I'm telling the truth.
All right, thank you. Please state your name and address.
Jay Shapiro, 90 Leaping Powder Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
You may proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Shapiro. What do you have to tell us about this project in addition to what Daniel just told us?
Not very much. I tried to work with all. I've been in front of the board numerous times. I'm trying to, what do you say, enhance the neighborhood and be copacetic with both the historic criteria as well as improving the look of the house. It's fun. It's very deteriorated. It was built absolutely minimal. Aluminum windows, 2x4 studs, and roof trusses. You couldn't have built it any more economically if it was a true prefab. I hope the board takes in consideration that I'm doing my best to improve the neighborhood, as you could see by the house that I did 2 doors down that was in worse condition than this one.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Let me see, board members have questions for you. Member Beachside.
Thank you. Just one question. I think this is a great project. Obviously, this house needs a little attention. I noticed the stucco is a brocade pattern, which we don't see a whole lot of. I don't know if you know if that's original to the home or if you intend to keep that pattern when you restucco.
Very good observation. I was going to leave that up to the board. I don't feel that that brocade is significant. I would like to do the traditional, smooth with heavy sand and round all the corners, just like I did on that other one, and use the same color.
And any idea if it's original to the house or?
I have no idea.
Thank you.
Any other comments, board members? Anybody feel strongly besides Ms. Jennifer Beachside about the brocaded pattern, stucco? No expressions. I'll take it to public comment. Anybody from the public wishing to comment? No one from the public is wishing to comment on this project. Member Larson.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm also sympathetic to the project. I think it's a really simple sort of change from what we see. I think my only concern is I just want to be thorough and know that, if this were older than what's being presented to us, does that affect our ability to make a decision? And also, I'm still unclear as to whether this is a fully prefabricated home or if just elements of it were prefabricated. I just feel like I don't have enough information.
Daniel, would you answer the questions, please?
I have only the information that I've made available to the board again, there is this somewhat,
Talk here.
sorry? The HCPI is somewhat ambiguous. It says that the building is from the 1950s, but that it was essentially torn down to the walls. I think that the materials, we should be able to make an educated guess about the date of construction based on the materials. I'm not an expert, but it seems to me that a 1970s date is probable. In terms of maybe Jake or Mr. Guida can say something about the dating based on materials. The building is not, strictly speaking, prefabricated in the sense that it was assembled on the site, according to the applicant. But it includes these prefabricated elements, such as the roof trusses.
Such as what?
I know.
Okay, but you understand my question, right? Where if this is over 50 years old, does that affect our ability to make a decision tonight? I'm just trying to be thorough because based on my knowledge of material evidence, this could be from anywhere from, post World War II to the 1970s. I just want to make sure that we're being, thoughtful here.
Okay, let me give you one more try to answer that question. The building is kind of currently non-contributing. The board has the right to postpone and request a status review. And then more evidence could be looked for. Otherwise, the board can accept the current non-contributing status and proceed to approve or deny the application.
Thank you, Daniel. Member Larson, did you have anything further?
No, thank you for clarifying, Daniel.
Member Guida.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I really appreciate Member Larson's comments on this, and just looking at the plans and looking at the structure. My sense is that apart from prefabricated elements, factory-made windows, roof trusses, things that we see in a lot of buildings in Santa Fe, I wouldn't characterize this as a prefabricated building. It may look like a double wide trailer, but it doesn't have the in plan, but it doesn't have the proportions that manufactured housing has. It's most likely a site-built mid-century ranch-ish house in Santa Fe. I agree that it may be it may be important to kind of have this discussion about its date of origin. But I'm probably more interested in that in a kind of more philosophical way in terms of the work that this board is doing. If we are to strictly just look at the code, we can move forward with this project tonight and approve it and say, well, it's a non-contributing building, owners don't like it. Let's make it into, look like everything else in the district and make it more palatable to the current market. And some people will call that gentrification. I think in its current status, the condition issues aside, the form of this building, contributes to the heterogeneous qualities of the district. Right, this is a unique building in Santa Fe. I certainly like to see a mix of building styles from different periods, certainly in the historic district. And so, there's that moment of interest. I don't know that I feel very strongly about this particular instance in this particular house, but it is something that comes up as something that, if we are to only just kind of blindly follow the rules, that we may be losing qualities of our heritage, qualities of diversity in our district. And so I'm holding it up as an example of that. And so I support Member Larson's flagging of this case and concern about the date.
Thank you. And I don't think that it would be that super difficult to find out if how long this house has existed in the neighborhood, because I believe there are not very many, but there probably are a few neighbors that have existed that are familiar with this house. And they can tell you whether it was really prefab and how long it's been there. But anyway, let's see what other comments board members have. Anything else? Any other comments, board members? Do you feel strongly about moving on, or do you feel strongly about giving this another look for a status review? Member Roybal.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion on this for approval.
Just a moment. We have another person with a raised hand. Member Larson.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you both, Chair Rios and Member Guida, for also thinking through this with me. I just want to note that we would be considering changing the roof pitch on this house, among other criteria that, are pretty significant. And what Member Guida said is, this is a style that, I think it warrants consideration, just in that it's a simple little ranch house, sure, but the vernacular history of Santa Fe is something that we often consider and talk about in many of our cases with buildings that sometimes have even less elements than this building. So I really would strongly encourage the board to consider postponing this case for a status review, so we give it the full consideration and offer our full attention to different periods in Santa Fe's history, and also considering different style elements that come from those periods. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Other board members have anything further to say in reference to this particular case? No more hands are up. I guess members are being silent in reference to either wanting to go forward with this case or wanting to postpone the case. We have Member Roybal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to go ahead and make the motion, and then if it passes, that'd be great. If it doesn't, then we can go back. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion on case 2021-004256HDRB 809 Abeta Street to move with approval that all the exceptions have been, the criteria has been met as per staff recommendations.
Is there a second to this motion?
I would second it.
Who seconded?
Frank.
Oh, Katz. Okay. Carl, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, you may. Jennifer Beachide.
Yes.
John Bienvenu.
Yes.
Anthony Guida.
I'll vote no.
Flynn Larson.
No.
Buddy Roybal.
Yes.
And Frank Katz.
Yes.
The motion passes with 2 no votes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. We shall move on to the next case.
Chair Rios,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the motion is that with respect to 809 Abeta Street, the motion is that the board approve that all exception criteria has been met.
Yes.
Was that your motion? Okay. All exception criteria has been met. Okay.
And the motion is approved.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. The last case this evening is located at 1299 Canyon Road. This case is 2021-004259. And Daniel, it is your case. May we hear the report, please?
Madam Chair, I have previously recused myself on this case and continue to recuse myself. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Oh, you did recuse yourself on this case?
Yes,
Oh, I thought you participated in this case.
there were 2 hearings. I participated in the first, but not the second.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. We'll see you later.
See you later.
Let the record show that Member Katz recused himself from this case. And Daniel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 1299 Canyon Road came before the board on March 9th, 2021, at which time they were proposing to construct a garage and a wall along the road in place of the current coyote fence and to install a vehicular gate. At that time, it was for an oxidized steel gate. That was denied by the board, and they put the condition that the gate be of a coyote fence material. The applicant now returns with the request that the gates be made of a steel frame with wooden boards, but not a coyote fence construction. Yes, oxidized steel frame with wood inserts with a natural wood color stain. That refers to this vehicular gate, which is off the street, and the street facing pedestrian gate to the west. So that is the proposal, and staff recommends approval, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Any questions for Daniel's board members? No questions at this time. Would you please swear in the applicant? I believe it's Sandra Donner.
That's correct.
Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address, Sandra.
Sandra Donner, 1611 Paseo de Peralta, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sandra. What else do you have to tell us about this project?
I think Daniel summed it up pretty well. We'd gone to the board months ago now with an all steel gate and wanted to come back with a compromise of having, a steel frame gate with the wood inserts that would allow us to have a much more sustainable gate. Sorry, my dog's making lots of noise in the background. And just allowing us to have, some structural stability, but still have the wood look inside. And that would be for both the pedestrian and vehicular gate. I'll be right back.
Thank you. In the meantime, I will ask if anyone from the public wishes to comment. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular project? If so, raise your hand. It appears not. I'll take it back to the board and I'll wait for the applicant. Member Guida?
I'd like to make a motion, Madam Chair.
Yes, you have the floor.
In case 2021-004259 HDRB 1299 Canyon Road, I move that the board approve the project as submitted for staff's recommendations.
Is there a second to this motion?
Member Roybal will second.
Okay. And roll call vote, please. Carl?
Let's see, John Bienvenu. How do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Anthony Guida,
Yes.
Flynn Larson,
Yes.
Betty Roybal,
Yes.
and Jennifer Beachhead.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Donner, are you back?
I am. Yeah, I just let the dog out. She's happy
Oh,
now.
okay. So get your project passed, your vehicular gate and your pedestrian gate. So good luck on your project.
Thank you so much. You all have a good night.
Okay, you as well. Any discussion items? Carly?
No, ma'am.
Pardon?
No,
Nothing?
none from
Okay.
staff.
Any matters from the board at this time? Any comments, any matters? It appears not. And our next meeting is going to be October the 26th, 2021. And ladies and gentlemen, it is 7:45 and we are now adjourned. Have a nice evening. And we'll see you on the 26th.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Buenas
Good
noches.
Thank you.